Well, this is Charlie again in Boulder, Colorado, rolling into episode 15. We just finished the emotions piece. It's one of my favorites. I hope you like it. This is a good one, too. I want you to think about this as, again, we're working two sides of the coordinate system, the emotional side and then the logical side. And so this is our complete comprehensive way of thinking about the world to look at both pieces. So this is an interesting piece, and let me just jump right in and get going. By the way, the little question marks are you thinking? I think, it's more important to like to think about things than how smart you are. If you're really smart and don't think about things, it's kind of useless. And to just be a habitual thinker and wonderer, I think that's even a better word, wondering. So to live in wonder is just a great place to be. I set my little timer, see how long we run here. Okay. So, are you aware that you have self talk? Are you aware that there's kind of like, I love this image of a megaphone in your head and an alter ego of you is in there talking all the time? I think we all have this. And analogous to our work with the emotional piece, let's make thoughts work for you too. So, we're trying to turn everything to your advantage, which I think is a good thing. Why not? So, people, especially in China, asked me, well, where'd you get the idea for this? This one I got from an event I went to with a friend, a psychologist friend, many years ago, by kind of an eccentric guy, Albert Ellis, who formulated something called rational emotive behavioral therapy. And what I like about this is that it's basically a very simplified form of cognitive psychology. Again, there are two sides, emotional and thinking. I'm not a psychologist, but I think that there are two sides of psychology. The Freudian piece, which is much more emotion based, particularly repressed emotions, and the cognitive piece. I think the cognitive piece actually is more effective, but most psychologists are trained with the Freudian piece, so that's what they do. Anyway, so let's get into this. So I want to introduce you to the idea of naming your thoughts storylines, and I'll explain why I picked that term in a moment. And we're going to color your thoughts. You're going to color green storylines that, according to their behaviors, we are forever behaviorists. And green storylines are thoughts that support behaviors that take you to your outcomes. And red storylines are thoughts that support behaviors that take you into away from your outcome and often into drama states. And the two most common drama states are the victim and blamer. Have you ever thought about how powerful thoughts are? Listen to this. In the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Our life is what our thoughts make it from the Roman Empire. The world is what we think it is. If we change our thoughts, we change the world. The famous author Tomlinson, H.M. Tomlinson. The word is the most beautiful tool you have. It's a tool of magic. This is from the Toltec Empire. This is from the capital Tula. I took this picture. I'm interested in civilizations and why they decline and go away. I've studied quite a few of them. Had the pleasure of visiting a lot of them, two actually in the West here, and several more in South Mexico, that part of the world, southern Mexico. And of course, the most famous example is the Eastern Roman Empire and the collapse of that, and very common things. Anyway, this is these peoples came from the collapse of an earlier civilization near Mexico City called Teotihuacan. And the word is the most beautiful tool you have as a human, a tool of magic from a book called The Four Agreements that I enjoyed. So this is our journey. We're going to have banners like this from now on. A little summary on the top, emotions, human energy. I'm accountable for managing my storylines. So we're going to combine emotions and storylines. This is our process of integration. And this creates a mindset that supports a behavior that generates storylines that take situations to outcome. This is a common theme we're going to have from now on, situations moving to outcome. I'm going to give you kind of an unusual definition of truth that I think helps explain this idea. We're going to look at how Storylines can take industries to ruin or success. That's how powerful they are. Go look at national storylines. And this is kind of a fun thing. And I tell people that I can go to a country and watch how people drive for a couple hours and tell a lot about their storylines. For example, in Germany and Japan, it's rule-based society. You can see everybody follows the rules. In China, in contrast, or Italy, they're more similar in that the rules are there to be ignored when it's more practical to do so. And it's all okay, just they're different and you can see them. This is an interesting kind of special case of storylines. Storylines about motivations. And I'm going to show you that these particular storylines are wrong 95% of the time. So why run them? And finally, and this is not a comprehensive list, this is just kind of a little menu of some of the snacks we're going to have. An example from the animal world about cows and how storylines can limit us that aren't real. And I've always choose to focus on you changing you. So let's start with a very simple idea, a story, the telling of a happening, true or fictitious, with the intent of informing or persuading. I think much more often persuading. I'm going to define truth as that which is unarguable. Storylines are a self-talk. We already talked about this. Thoughts and their expressions that seem true to us, but are not the truth because they're arguable. Let's go over this again. Storylines are our self-talk, thoughts that we think, and then we speak and express that seem true to us, but are not the truth because they're arguable. So what is the unarguable truth then? I think the surest unarguable truth is the truth of your experience. I'm very careful when I'm having an argument with someone to say, I heard versus you said. With a rational person, I heard is not arguable, and you said will almost always produce a retort, an argument. A really simple case, I like simple examples. If I said, I feel hot in this room, that's unarguable. If I said this room is hot, that's arguable. So I want to introduce you to an idea that's very powerful we're going to come to later. The people who we're going to do a module on appreciation, and people say to me, I'd love to do this more, but I don't know how to make it authentic. Here's how you do it. You live in a mindset of gratitude, then you experience the appreciation, and the appreciation is the truth of your experience and automatically authentic. So a very simple formula. If you want to make appreciation authentic, live in gratitude, make it the truth of your experience. Then it's unarguable. Of course, there's always exceptions. Spouses. I'm hungry. No, you're not. So I play with words in the English language from time to time, and I ask the group, are you guilty of homophily? Why is this fun? Well, nobody knows. Very few people know what this word means, and they think it might have something to do with homosexuality because it's got that word homo. So everybody's dead silent. So I'll wait a little while and say, homophily is our preference to relate with people who share our storylines. And this is very easy to see. We like to be with people who have values similar to ours. Our values are a very deep part of us. Religions, people like to be with people with the same religion because when you hear everybody sharing the same storyline, it has to be God's truth. Politics, oh my God. So here's a little piece of human dynamics. When we hear storylines we agree with, emotions we generate are we feel glad and affection, and a small voice says that's the truth. Storylines we disagree with make us angry and we tend to fight and argue. And a small voice says that's just your storyline. So in workshops from this point on, when we're having a dialogue about something and someone says something I agree with, I'll joke with them and say, that's the truth. And when they say something I disagree with, I'll just say, that's just your storyline. And of course, they know I'm just playing with them to illustrate the idea. Here's the basic point. These are your outcomes, the things you wanted. So we already did this for you and the proposal team. You wrote your outcomes in your workbooks. Storylines support behaviors, or always behaviors that take you to your outcomes. green storylines. Red storylines make you forget all about your behaviors, get you stuck in S. So I asked the group, what is S? This is another joke in the English language. S is the vernacular for shit, and nobody wants to say it. So I'll say, oh, S is situation. What did you think? So again, stuck in situation, unable to move to outcome. And this is kind of a humorous thing I found for this. Storylines drive success and ruin even in large industries. A U.S. storyline ran this story. A U.S. industry ran this storyline. Improving quality means higher cost. Always looking at the behavior. What behavior does a storyline support? You manufacture low quality products. The U.S. industry had not questioned this storyline until another country took 66% market share, and I'm sure you know what industry that was. It was automobiles. Edward Deming is an American consultant who was ignored in the U.S. almost as much as I am, and was adopted in his case in Japan, whereas China's been more for me. And he went to a tiny town where there was an automobile manufacturing facility that no one had ever heard of, the city of Japan. He taught them a new storyline. Improving quality is the best way to lower cost. Behavior that's supported, manufacturing high quality products. Isn't this stuff simple? So religion storylines, they're interesting. This is the American humorist Mark Twain. Man is a religious animal. He's the only religious animal. The only animal that has the true religion. Several of them, in fact. He's the only animal that loves his neighbor as himself and cuts his throat if his theology isn't straight. He has made a graveyard of the globe and is trying his honest best to smooth his brother's path to happiness in heaven. So you might think this would be controversial or offensive, but I've used this in the Bible Belt in Alabama. No one's ever been bothered by this. They get that it's good humor. And basically, running religious storylines can make good people better and may make bad people worse. You can think about the religious terrorists who justify terror based on religion. So I usually ask the group, is it okay if I could talk a little about religion? And they're getting that I'm kind of playing with some fun now, so they say okay. So storylines about Jesus. A burglar breaks into a house and he hears, Jesus is watching you. He sees a parrot in the corner. He walks up and asks, are you talking to me? The parrot says, yes, my name is Ronald. The burglar laughs and says, what kind of idiot gives a parrot a stupid name like that? The parrot laughs and says, the same idiot who names his pit bull Jesus. So I'd like to talk about heaven and hell. Heaven is a Japanese wife, British police, a Chinese cook. We love Chinese food. An American house, that's our house that unfortunately burned down last October. And a German car. By the way, it burned up our Audi in the same fire. Hell is a Japanese house. They're very small. A British cook. A Chinese salary. The Chinese love this. Indian trains. And German police, which is, again, I'm joking. I've never had any difficulty with police in Germany, but they do look a bit fearsome. That's really what they look like. So, national storylines. This is fun. The one that bothers me is that in the US today, we can each choose our own reality. And the behavior is to ignore peer-reviewed science, which I trust and believe in, which is burning up the world. In China, too many people. Once in a while, someone will come up to me and say, we don't like you saying that about us. I said, I didn't make this up. You tell me. And I've seen crowds of people in China that are just mind-boggling. And the behavior is that practicality overrides rules. And you can see it again in the driving. This is not an accident. This is a scene in Beijing in the traffic. I've been in cars in Beijing where people drove the wrong way down a two-way street. When the traffic gets heavy, the shoulder becomes express lane. These people are very careful, very excellent drivers. No one else can get away with this. but and they get fined because there's cameras everywhere, but the fines are small. And Japan, interesting case. Friends of mine there, and I've lived there as well, said that the biggest issue is that the island can't grow enough food. You may know Japan is very mountainous, not many natural resources, a population of 125 million people can feed about 40. The behavior is karoshi, death by overwork, and the colonialism that you're probably familiar with when Japan invaded Manchuria, the Philippines, all these other things before World War II. France, we have the best food and language. Behavior, we deserve many vacations and huge pensions. I don't know how anyone can pay for them. Germany, discipline and effort. Behaviors, obey the rules and work hard. Is it obvious why these two countries have been at war through most of time? And North Korea, really interesting special case. Dear leader, fear of attack. I don't know why the U.S. would attack them. I guess they're afraid we're going to bring South Korea in. And the behaviors of isolation and underdevelopment. It's remarkable just across the border from the prosperity in China and South Korea. So storylines about motivations. I did a lot of this development work when I was working as a consultant for TRW. And one day they called me and said that the customer is threatening to cancel our contract. And the reason they called me was it was a NASA customer. They knew that I knew the person. And it was about this giant Earth sensing satellite contract they had won. And their competitor had gone in and said, you could do this better with a bunch of small satellites and less risk. So I got on a United jet, flew out there the next week. I said, what's going on? Bruce, my client, said our competitor got to them again. Sam said he's never liked our company. Mary says he's getting orders from above. Now, fortunately, I knew these people pretty well. I said, Bruce, you always see that competitor, that Lockheed Martin behind every tree. Sam, you frequently complain people don't like the company. And Mary, you complain about upper management and over management. What's going on here? This is what the psychologists call projection. I'm interested in how valuable our perception is and how inaccurate it is. And what's happening here is, especially under stress, and these people are under high stress, we project our own stuff so brightly onto the scene, that's all we can see. So their storylines have nothing to do with what's really going on. They're about each of them. Again, the author Tomlinson, we see things not as they are, but as we are. So imagine you're their consultant. What would you do? It's a very simple answer. What I did was, anybody ask him? And Sam said, I did. He said he wanted the flexibility to accommodate budget cuts. I knew the guy, and I said, he was there during the aftermath of Challenger when we had schedule delays and all the overruns from what's called sustaining engineering, keeping on engineering teams. This would be deep in his psyche. Can we tell a good story? Yes. So help them put the presentation together. They called me after and said he was so happy that he said, I want to put more work with your company. Another consultant colleague of mine does work in this, and he says, storylines about other people's motivations are wrong 95% of the time. If you have any doubt about this, just tune into a right-wing channel to listen to motivations of prominent politicians and tune into the left-wing channel. You won't believe they're talking about the same person. So when you know something's wrong 95% of the time, what do you do about it? Well, what I do is I listen to myself and other people running motivation storylines. I've done this work long enough that I don't do it, but you're going to find it's much easier to hear it in other people. And so when I hear it in other people, I just say, people who know this work, I say, do you hear what you're doing? They go, oh my God, I'm running motivation storylines, aren't I? I said, yep, that you are. Stop. It's going to be wrong. So this is an exception to not changing other people rule. When a team member runs a red storyline, raise your hand if you think it's useful to argue them out of it. It's not. And you got to be careful. Some people, especially the extreme blues, love to argue. For them, it's a way they enjoy communication, and the yellows and greens hate it. So the 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 idea is don't wrestle with a pig. The pig loves it. That won't work. How about inquire what would happen if we ran that storyline? Is that useful? Again, check. I think that works if you can telegraph curiosity. They're going to look at the intent of what they sense of your comment. If it's if it's thinly veiled criticism, it won't work. If it sounds like curiosity, it will. How about a, offer a replacement? I think it's like personal feedback. People come up to me and say, "I've got some feedback for so and so. Should I give it to them?" I say, "Ask them if they want it. If they don't want it, don't bother. If they do want it, then they'll hear you, and you'll be doing them a favor." So it's the same thing. So I live in part of the U.S. where there's lots of ranches, and you drive down the road and you see these things when you're in the countryside. What this is about is there's a fence here, and there's cows or buffalo on one side of the fence or the other, and they don't want the animal to go to the other side, so they don't want just to be able to walk around the fence going into the road. Well, I've seen these, and these are fairly common. I don't pay much attention to them. I just go rumbling across them. And then one day I saw this. So I stopped the car, turned around, went back to this house, and people out in the country here are pretty friendly. And I said, "I'm just curious about this. Does this work just as well as this?" And they said, "Yes." I said, "Does the cattle have to experience this first?" They said, "No." So I'm not an expert in cow psychology, but here's what I think. Cows have two eyes like we have two eyes, but for their evolutionary survival, they don't have depth perception. Their eyes are looking for attacks in a broad field of view to the side so they can do something about it. So to the cow's eyes, these things look the same. Because I asked the rancher, do they have to see this first? No. So it's about their perception. So why am I telling you this? Because you may be running storylines about what you're capable of that look like this, but are actually this. Whether you think you can do it or think you can't, you're right. So to close this section, storylines are thoughts, true for us, but not the truth because they're arguable. They powerfully influence behaviors. Our behaviors when we think them. So what we let run in our head and permit ourselves to think affects our behaviors. And when we express them, it affects other people's behaviors. We color storylines that take us away from our outcomes red, and storylines that support our outcomes green. And we only run and express green storylines. Card check on storylines, thumbs up, thank you. Enjoyed this session, and we'll stop here and get ready for the next one. Be safe, and thank you for tuning in.